School years back starting for universities around this country, for colleges around the country. However, a lot of professors in states like Florida and Texas are trying to get out of where they are because a survey of 4,250 faculty members across 4 states, including Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas, highlights the growing concerns of political involvement in higher ed and the widespread desire to find employment in other states. Let's take a look at this reporting from Tampa Bay Times. It says the survey was administered by faculty groups in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas, including local chapters of the American Association of University Professors. Faculty in those places had been hearing their colleagues talk anecdotally about wanting to leave their states after lawmakers passed legislation that restricted tenure, gutted diversity programs, and targeted other longstanding practices in higher education. So, in addition to the political climate surrounding higher education and the rhetoric that the right wing is using to attack higher ed and calling it liberal indoctrination centers, these are the main reasons that educators want to move out or are even starting to move out of those states. 71% cited academic freedom concerns. 68% cited pay, and 58% cited tenure, the targeting of diversity initiatives and or LGBTQ plus issues. It continues on. About 80% of respondents described their state's political atmosphere just surrounding academia as poor or very poor, which won't surprise you once we start discussing the legislation that's been passed in some of these states or they're trying to pass that attacks higher ed. So really quickly, anti-tenure Republicans in Texas and in other states, including Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, and South Carolina, has said they want to rein in unaccountable professors who are pushing a liberal agenda in the classroom. And let's talk specifically about Texas, because Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick wanted to end professor tenure in its entirety and led a hard fight and campaign to do that, which, I mean, you might as well just be going out and saying, I want no high quality professors in my state. I want the kids and the young adults of my state to get the worst education they possibly can, because no professor worth their salt wants to come teach here. And he was only reined in slightly by the Texas Senate, who passed a bill in April which barred schools from granting the benefit of tenure to newly hired professors. And here's a statement from Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He had this to say: tenured university professors are the only people in our society that have the guarantee of a job. That's completely untrue. These professors claim academic freedom and hide behind their tenure to continue blatantly advancing their agenda of societal division. No examples of that, by the way. He didn't provide a single example of how that's happening in Texas schools whatsoever. But the 74 reported that the Texas House last month approved a much milder version, allowing schools to fire tenured faculty for, quote, professional incompetence or, quote, conduct involving moral turpitude. Intentionally vague language. That version is the one the legislator sent to the desk of Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who is expected to sign it into law. And of course, we're seeing the same sorts of legislation being talked about and passed in Ron DeSantis' state of Florida. He signed legislation that would ban state funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at Florida state universities. And the Pensacola News Journal reported that the new law, SB 266, bars Florida state universities from spending state or federal funds to promote, support, or maintain any programs that advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or promote or engage in political or social activism. Exceptionally broad language so that they can try to crack down on as many organizations that are led by Black students and students of color as possible, as by LGBTQ students as possible. The reporting continues. How gender and race are taught on Florida campuses will be restricted under the new law. It requires university officials to review any lessons, quote, based on theories that systemic racism, sexism, and privilege are inherent in the institutions, of the United States, and were created to maintain social, political, and economic inequity. So in other words, they're making sure that the students in public universities in Florida don't learn the truth about America, that they're continued to be taught as they are in public low or secondary and primary education in Florida, a false patriarchy patriotic narrative of this country, one that claims that America wasn't founded on slavery, that the wealth of this country wasn't built on the backs of slaves, and that the generations after those slaves didn't receive any of the wealth that they've built. I mean, Cenk, it's so frustrating to read that these states are passing laws to make the people living them dumber, to attack the people who are trying to create a better educated populace, and they're having their intended effect of getting these professors out of the state. I mean, it was about half of professors in Florida said that they want to leave. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, there's two different problems here. The first one is the one you're alluding to, Rayvon, there, because look, there's a reason why they do this. They want to replace things that are part of objective reality with their own propaganda. So they don't want you to teach things that are true, like the actual history of slavery, because they think it hurts their feelings and they want to replace it with propaganda. So it's not that people are either smart or not smart. That's just genetic, largely speaking. But what they want to do is they want to keep them ignorant and not knowing what reality is. You know why they do that? Because they're not on the right side of reality. If they were on the right side of reality, they would love for professors to teach things that are real. So look, if you're a teacher or a professor, what would you do? Now let's take the example of University of Texas and UCLA. So they're both great schools, or they both used to be great schools. And so if you're either a new professor that's gonna take a job at Texas or at UCLA, or you're now at University of Texas and a previously fantastic school, okay? Well, what would you think? Well, if I stay in Texas, I might not have tenure. That's already devastating. And they might make me teach things that are not true, or prevent me from teaching things that are true. Well, then that makes your decision super simple, right? If you can, get out of that backward state and go to UCLA, an equally good, great school, and rescue yourself and be able to do the job that you signed up for. Of course, a bunch of professors are gonna leave. A huge percentage are gonna leave. And that leads to the second problem, the bifurcation of our society. We continue to split ourselves apart. So and by the way, this goes both directions. So a lot of people leave California going, well, I want lower taxes or less crime or whatever it might be. And they're going to Austin, Nashville, and Florida, et cetera. They say, I don't want the blue states. I'm conservative and I don't want to live in a blue state. And then the red states are passing these draconian laws and backwards laws. And so any reasonable person living there, or let's say a progressive person living there, goes, well, I don't want to live under these rules. I don't want my kids living under these rules. And I don't want my kids being taught that slavery was halfway okay. That's nuts. So I'm gonna leave. And then what happens? The red states get redder, the blue states get bluer, and we as a society become even more fractured. So I'm super worried about both of those phenomena. Nina.
Yeah, we should be concerned. This is exactly what these people want. I mean, their master design is working. It is, in fact, the dumbing down of America because they benefit from it. And Republicans in particular can continue to stoke the cultural wars that they are doing right now, this cultural populism that is animating this society, even beyond when we talk about politics, even beyond when we talk about who's a Democrat or a Republican. That is always a looming variable. And I can tell you, as someone who was a college professors come from all walks of life, all ideologies. We are teaching the facts in the classroom, and good professors, and I know there are professions where everybody's not good necessarily at their trade, but good professors want their students of all ages, because all ages come through college campuses, to be critical thinkers. And part of thinking critically is also having laid before you what are the facts. So for me as a historian, I am gonna lay out the historical facts. And since Ray brought up slavery being the original sin stain on this country, there was nothing good that came out of that for the people who were enslaved, and generationally, nothing good came out of it. And to have somebody like DeSantis and his educational board, his state education board say, oh, black enslaved people, boy, they learned some good skills while they were enslaved, but not tell, so none of that is true. Number one, they act as if enslaved people didn't come with a set of skills already. They did come with a set of skills already, which is why they were most lucrative and in creating the United States as the hegemon nation that it is today. But nothing good comes from being stripped of your culture, your religion, your name, being raped, being separated from your family, not being able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Nothing good comes from knowing that when you birth a baby into the world, the baby will take on the condition of the mother, even if the mother was raped by a white man. Nothing good can ever come of a situation like that. So these Republicans are getting exactly what they want in these states, and then they are given an assist on the federal level by these Republicans in terms of continue to cement not only the culture wars, but this whole faux populism that they have going on. And then there's no pushback, no real pushback from Democrats who have power in this country. Not really.
Yeah, boy, that's a whole nother topic. But I do want to say one last thing, and I do this a lot too. I address it to Republicans and conservatives in the audience, and you do with it as you please. But look, number one, I talked to a neighbor earlier today. She's mixed race, half black, half white. She's a little sick of the Democratic Party for a lot of similar reasons we are, some different reasons, etc. But she said to me, "But what am I going to do? I can't go to the Republicans because they're lunatics." Republicans, why do you, here in America, why do you insist on being lunatics? So you know how easily you could win some elections if you stop being so extreme? So for example, you want to object to some portions of DEI teaching. No problem. I object to some versions and some portions of those versions of DEI teaching. So what? That's a normal debate, discussion, etc. But Ron DeSantis says, oh, anyone who objects to me banning DEI is a Marxist professor. Come on. So that English lit person, the biology professor, they're all Marxists? Look, I've debated Marxists 100 times. We did a segment on the show where I debated a Marxist on a regular basis. So obviously I don't agree with Marxists. But those professors aren't Marxist. When you say that, you're a goddamn liar, and it makes it impossible to support you. Impossible, unless you say, hey, I don't mind liars. I don't mind people who are crazy and extreme, etc. And look, I had a professor at when I went to college. Now back then I was a Republican, but I wasn't an extreme, I was there, a liberal Republican existed back in the day. Okay, I know it sounds impossible now, right? But I took a class with a history professor who was a top aide to Richard Nixon. And I went to the class and I read the syllabus, etc. I read the facts, and then I listened to the professor who clearly had a conservative perspective and one that was way more conservative than mine, and I disagreed with him. And you know what happened? My head didn't pop off. I survived. Oh wow, we could listen to other people's point of view. And what's crazy is that the right wing says, we're for freedom. And we need to be able to say whatever we want, including racist words and all this stuff. And then you go, okay, then why don't you listen to that guy that you're calling a Marxist, who by the way isn't a Marxist, and he's actually trying to teach you about history. No way, I don't want to listen to him, fire him, I hate cancel culture, but fire him. Because he won't lie for us, fire him. Okay, well then, you deserve the fate that you have as Republicans, because nobody can sign up for this madness. Even if they're conservative, they can't sign up for this madness. So go ahead, drive away all the smart, educated people in your states and see how it turns out for you.
And the kids are gonna suffer the most, in society by extension. I mean, that's really what hurts here. And every professor, every teacher in a K through 12 classroom, everybody can't just pick up and move. I mean, one of the things that Ray laid out in those stats is the pay is not good. So wanting to move and being able to move are two different things. But even the ones who can move, even if it's a minute amount of educators who can leave, that hurts the children. It hurts, and it hurts young adults or seasoned adults, whoever is in those classrooms. It really does hurt, and over time, it is going to have an impact in our country and the world.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a young Turk.